Before we start this video, I want you guys to know two things. First, when I recorded this video, my noise reduction software wasn't working well, which led to some crackling sound randomly. I still haven't figured out why my software is doing that, but I did try to fix it in post to make it bearable to hear. Due to these crackling issues, some words are just not audible. So simply enable the subtitles, and if you don't like subtitles, then you could simply enable them when you don't understand something and then disable it after that. Also, I did use auto subtitle tool and did watch the subtitles to find any mistake. But if I miss any, then just leave a comment and I can just edit it in the YouTube editor. In this video, sometimes the crackling is less and sometimes it gets high. So I apologize for that, as I don't want to record 2 hours of this again. Second, as I was explaining GSAP, I did run into some issues here and there, which are pretty normal when working with Elementor. As GSAP allows us to animate CSS and Elementor already adds its own CSS, there sometimes are conflicts. If we were doing just coding, these issues would not have happened in the first place. So instead of just showing you guys the solution straight up, I decided to not cut up the parts where I try to figure out what's wrong, as you might also face this issue and it could be good to know the solutions. So let's get started. But before that, I have reached over 50,000 total views in my channel and still haven't reached 1,000 subscribers. So do me a favor, leave a like and subscribe so that I can keep making videos like this. Hello everyone, and to bring life to your website, we can actually add some animations like this. You could see if I scroll down, it does this animation. If I scroll up, it does this animation. This stuff, if I refresh right now, you could see it just pops up like this. Pretty cool stuff. It brings like life to your website. And this page has been made with GSAP and with JavaScript. So if you want this page as a template, you could actually get it, which is like for $5 on my website, and it has been already purchased by a few people. But what we are today going to learn is the GSAP library platform, which makes like animation very easy. And even if you're not familiar with coding, it is like very easy to work with, because it does require coding, but it's very basic code. It's like CSS level of coding, and CSS you could learn like in few hours, like 1 hour. So you could say this is the GSAP platform that we are going to use. It's free. There is also a paid version, but the free version does like most of the stuff that we require. So you could see we can even do horizontal scrolling, which I'm not going to show today because the GSAP animation is so big that I am actually going to divide this tutorial in 2 parts. And this is going to be the first part, and based on how this video does, I'll decide to do the second part or not. So you can see scroll animations, SVG animations, text animations, UI interactions. There are a lot more stuff that you could do. And if you actually have checked my website or my YouTube channel, you will see that I have actually already created lots of GSAP animations, but I have never taught how to do the GSAP animations by the basics of it. So in this video, I am going to show you how we can do this, and this is what we are going to work with. So this page you could see, and again this looks like very simple and basic, right? And it's important to use like simple shapes and all to learn it so that you can understand it better, rather than using like the real world examples like this. It might complicate it a bit to understand it. So I created this page which has like few animations. So first one is like knowing how to do transform, rotate and scale. You could see, and transform, rotate and scale are like the most basic part of the animations, and this is something that you would use like in every single animation because you're moving and all, right? Next is like we will learn how to timing it, how to do time and stuff. Then we will learn that we can do any CSS property. So it first turns to white and then it turns to orange. And then the clip path image reveal like this. If you actually check my another video in which I show like 10 different types of clip path image reveal. So if you go to my blog page, this is like the image reveal with clip path GSAP animations. So this one I actually created to like quickly get the, you know, the code and all. So this one is like from bottom reveal. This is from like top reveal, left reveal, right reveal. You could even do like shapes related stuff like this. I'm quickly going over it because this is like a whole video that I've created before, which is like this one. So this is what we are going to learn, and then we are going to learn how to do stagger animations, which is like pretty common. So rather than having all of this animating at once, it should animate like after some timing. This is just a recording note that I have added. Then we will learn how to do repeat animations, which is like pretty easy. Then timeline, which is like the most powerful thing about GSAP. So if I do refresh, you could see that it waits for this animation to happen, then it waits for the animation to happen, and then this one waits for this animation to happen. So when this animation happens, then only the second one would load, and when this one loads, then only the third animation would load. Then we have ScrollTrigger, which you see. So if you have checked like all this previous one, I'm refreshing the page, but that is because I have not added any ScrollTrigger for it. And ScrollTrigger is basically that the animation should only load when it is on the viewport. We don't want the animation to happen when we are not on the viewport, right? For example, this animation, you could see we want it to happen. I don't know why it's not working. Okay, for some reason it just stopped working, I guess. Oh no, it's Stagger, my bad. It is this one. So you could see that this animation, which is like going white to orange, it happens. But if I refresh it somewhere else, I'm right now at this section, but if I go up, you could see it has already done the animation. We don't want that, right? Which is why we use ScrollTrigger. And this like makes like so much like the animation looks nicer. We can actually do like more stuff, and we can control a lot more stuff. Then we have scrub, which is like based on a scroll animation, and then we have pin like this, which is basically position sticky. So I've already created a video on it, how we can use position sticky instead of creating like a ScrollTrigger. But ScrollTrigger actually allows us to do like more stuff too. So yeah, that's all we are going to do today. These are 10 stuff, and it actually has like a lot more stuff like play, reverse. There's also like horizontal scrolling. There's also like text animations, like dividing the text into like its own parts. I've already created text Stagger tutorial, so you could check that after you have checked this GSAP animation, and that uses like it uses GSAP and then the text Stagger animations with like split type JavaScript library, which is also easy to learn. It's not much complicated. So yeah, this is the 10 stuff that we are going to learn today, and if this video does good, I'll make the next part too. If you want, you can actually get this page as a template, and you might notice one thing in this page that I was showing what we are going to do is that the first item moves, but the second item does not. Even with the second one, you could see it's stationary, you could see it's stationary. So nothing's happening to the right side, and there's one reason for it, and that is because I decided to create this as a template which you could download, and then rather than starting from scratch, you could actually animate the second one to practice it. So all these elements that you are seeing, you could I've kept it empty so that you could practice it, and if some issue happens, you could like check the code which is provided on the first element. So this is one thing that we are going to do, but before we start, I need to explain to you a more basic stuff about GSAP so that we start from the first point. Okay, so first thing first, we need to type GSAP CDN in Google, and the first section, which is this page, will show the CDN for GSAP. What this does is that it runs the JavaScript library on our website. So to do that, we simply add our HTML widget like this, and then we copy the first one and click the middle icon and then paste it in here. Now obviously we do not really need to have like all this stuff. We can actually just remove this much part if we want to keep it cleaner, but it's up to you whether you want to keep the whole stuff or not. And then the second one is ScrollTrigger plugin of GSAP. So you could say this is GSAP, and this rest of them are like plugins that are coming with GSAP, and the one that we want is ScrollTrigger, so that we can control when our animation runs. So let me just copy this. You could paste directly like this one, no issues with that. You could just paste it like this. I like to keep it cleaner, it's up to you. So I'm just going to paste this to like this, and when we do this, what it does is that it is now running GSAP on this particular page. It's not running to our whole website, and it's usually not useful to run it to your whole website, because if there are some pages that do not require GSAP, then it would still run the library, and it can be a bit, you know, like it might lower the speed of your website because it needs to load the JavaScript library. But if you want, you could add it in the custom code of your Elementor. So if you go to your dashboard and then add it in the custom code, you could add it you will need Elementor Pro for custom code, but if you don't want Elementor Pro, you could use the plugin WP code, which allows you to add like this code to your website. There are enough tutorials online to show you how to do that. And this is how we add our GSAP. Now the next part I want to show you is, let me just make it like bigger, like random size. Right now this HTML needs to be below our elements. So if you check in my tutorial template, I've always created this HTML widget below all my contents. So you could see below all my contents, and that way, the reason why we do that is because we want this page to be loaded, right? Or this element to be loaded, and then our JavaScript to be controlling that animation. Because if the element is not even loaded, then what is our GSAP function going to like control? Which is why we keep it at the bottom. But in some cases, if you don't want to do it in, like, let's say keeping this HTML widget at the bottom of your elements, what you could do is you could search for like Windows load JavaScript, go to this Mozilla site, scroll down to like this one, and then paste it in your notepad or anything. And here we can just delete this part, and whatever you add inside this, so whatever JavaScript you add inside this would only run when your whole page has been loaded. So that way you don't have to worry of like where this HTML widget is, whether it is on top or bottom. You could place it anywhere, but it would only run when the Windows has been loaded or a page has been loaded, and then the code would load. So it's up to you how you want to proceed. So first thing that I want to teach you is, if we go to gsap.com, you could see there are cool animations that they have been showcasing. There are lots of it. We will go to docs. The docs page does not load always, which is kind of annoying to me. I don't understand if it's my internet issue or something from their side. So I'll just wait, but till that time I'll show you what we are going to do. So just delete this for time being. So first thing first, we need to learn GSAP, how it works. Okay, so we type GSAP to, or we can type GSAP from, or we can type GSAP from capital with O, like from to. So these are the functions that we use with GSAP, and it is very basic, like English grammar, I would say. So if we type to, we would specify which state our element should go. For example, you might not understand this yet because we are still learning, but you could see I have set GSAP to, and then I have given some values around here like x800, rotate, and this one. So when we set to, it goes to state or whatever values you have added in here. Like I have added 800, so it is going 800 on the right side, 360, so it's going 360 on the right side by rotating it slowly, and then scaling it 1.5 like this. So that is because we are using to, so it goes from initial location, whatever it is set in your Elementor or CSS, and then it takes you to that location. If you use from, which is from, what it would do is whatever you type in here would be the initial location, and it would take you to this location, whatever you have set in CSS or Elementor. If you don't understand, don't worry, you will understand it pretty easily soon. And then in from to, we can add like both of this, but I'm not going to teach you. It's like very basic. I'll just show you the docs when it loads, and it's like very basic. So to give you a brief explanation, and this is going to be for Elementor. So even if you're not using Elementor, it's still going to explain to you how GSAP works, or you would still be able to use it if you're not using Elementor. But with Elementor, there are few things that you need to worry about. Okay, so I'm going to create a container for time being. I'm going to make this, let's say, like red in color, and then give it like a random height. Okay, so this is the container that we have. So there is like a naming convention that we need to learn. Okay, so we type GSAP to, we open the brackets, we type single quotation or double quotation if you want, and inside of this we add the CSS class of the element that we want to control. So for example, I want to control this red box, so I'll add a CSS class. I'll call it like DMRed, like this, and then inside GSAP2 I'll type dot DMRed and then close the quotation like this. So because we are using CSS class, that's why we are using dot. But if we were using like a CSS ID, then we have typed hash, like hash like this. So based on what you're using, if you're using ID or CSS class, we can use hash or dot. I'll use dot because I'm more familiar, or I commonly use like class, but it's up to you. Then we type comma, we open and close our curly brackets, and then we add our closing bracket because we opened a closing bracket, so we want to open a closing bracket, and then we add a semicolon like this, because JavaScript requires a semicolon. And inside this curly brackets, if you do enter, this is where our code would be. So to explain to you how fast I could do, it's like GSAP to DM like DM red like this, comma close bracket like this, and do enter like this. So anything we add, it would be in here. You could always open like docs to see how it works. So that is how we add like GSAP what you call the function or whatever it is called. I don't understand the naming conventions, but just remember that's how we type. So if you go in here in GSAP and type click on twin, you could see like GSAP to, from, and from to, and you could see like different stuff that they have done. So like I said, GSAP to, then we type whatever class we want to control and all the elements or function that we want to control. This is kind of in one line, which is kind of confusing to understand, so I'll explain to you how we do it. And one important thing I want you guys to know, or maybe let's just start it and then see how it goes straight up. So the first container, I'm just going to copy it to my different page. You don't need to do it, you could use it on like this straight up page if you download this template, or maybe you create your own. I'm just going to do it one by one so it's easy. Let me just change this to be black color. Okay, there we go. So you can see I have already added the GSAP in this HTML widget. So one more thing, you do not need to type this again and again. You only need to type it once. Imagine this as installing a software, okay? You only need to install it once, right? You don't install 3 times. But remember that if you create, let's say, duplicate this one, this is my bottom one, and this is my top one. If I remove this one around here, it would not work on the top one. And the reason is because the way JavaScript or this page loads, it loads the first element, then second, third, fourth, like this. And right now in this one, we haven't actually installed GSAP. So you could see in the last one, the GSAP is loaded in here, but this is getting loaded before this one. So the code would not work at all, okay, if the GSAP is installed after that one. So obviously if you use like the Windows onload function, you don't have to worry about it. Just make sure it's in order, okay? So first thing first, the way we do it is by making this container. I'll select this, and in this CSS class, I'll call it, I guess, DM square, like this. So DM square, and to keep it organized, I'll create an HTML widget and place it at the bottom like this. So make sure I'm like placing it below this one so that my GSAP is already loaded right here, okay? This is DM square like this. Let's go in here. Let's type style, and style allows you to add CSS, okay? If you don't have Elementor Pro, you could still use style to add a custom CSS. In the script, we'll type GSAP to, and I'll explain from later. So GSAP from I'll explain later, but let's learn to first. GSAP to, I type DM square, right? So DM square, comma, do curly brackets to enter. And again, Elementor automatically adds like this closing brackets. If I type closing bracket in here, I guess maybe it's not doing again and again, but if you check like this, so if I open my curly, there we go. If I open my curly brackets or like this curved bracket, it automatically added the closing bracket. I typed or DM square, added comma, and I'm just going to create like the left curly bracket, and Elementor will automatically create the right curly bracket. So you see, which makes it easy to like work with. Sometimes it adds like extra curly brackets and all, and it can be annoying. So right now this container, we want to move it on the x-axis on the right side. So there are few things that you need to know about GSAP properties that you could control. X allows us to move it left and right. Y allows us to move it top and bottom. And then the basic, scale, opacity, which are like CSS properties. If you want to learn CSS, there are like, you could learn CSS in like, I guess 20 minutes, 30 minutes pretty easily, like at least basics of it. And 1 or 2 hours to like learn like even more, but it's very easy to do. We are just controlling, like GSAP allows us to control our CSS property via our JavaScript, okay? So if I type X 500, you could see it went on the right side, and we do not add like semicolon in GSAP like this inside this property. Okay, so if I copy this in here to show you guys, you could see I do not add like semicolon, we add a comma if we want to add extra stuff. So if I want to add, let's say, rotate 360 degree, like 360 degree like this, you could see I added comma and then added the second property, but you will never add a comma at the last property. Okay, so comma actually means that we are actually going to add like extra properties, but as this is the last one, we do not add the comma at the last one. One easy way is to just copy the code into ChatGPT and just ask like, why is my code not working, and it would say like, you are missing this comma, you have accidentally forgot this dot or something like this. Okay, so remember that stuff. So I'll just add comma and then also add like rotate. I can type like 360 and it would still work right now. And remember that in like the editor, it does animation, but it's kind of annoying because in the editor, it does not refreshes the code. So you need to check like the live page to get like the real example. So you could say it did the rotation and then it did that stuff. Another thing is if you want to add like anything else which are not numbers. So if I want to type, let's say 360 degree, I can add it in single quotation like this. So if you want to add X as in like percentage, then you could add like, it didn't work. Why did it not work? Let's see. You could see like some errors in console if you have any. Let me just try adding like a delay. You don't need to worry about anything right now. I'll just explain one by one what delay does, what another stuff does. Okay, so there you go. So you could see if I want to add anything that's not number, I can add in like this quotation. So for example, for color and all, we can use quotation, which you will learn as we progress in this tutorial. Obviously, if I type 50%, it does not move it 50% of the parent container. It moves the 50% of this container. It didn't move much because 50% is like not. Also, I didn't add it in quotation. So let's add it in quotation. Let's do 100. So because we are using percentage, if you know how percentage works with like in CSS, it will only move 100% of this container. It would not move 100% of this one, because when we add 500, it moves it 500 pixels. But when we type 100%, it is 100% of this container. So you could say it moved like 100% of this container. I need to add a delay because the animation is loading before the page is completely loading. So let's work with this stuff like 500. That is good enough for us. Also, I added comma, which is why it's probably was not loading. You could see at the end I have comma, which could be a reason why it was not looking perfect. Next thing we can do like scale 2. Let's do that. So it's scaled. One thing is it's loading way too fast. So I can simply do is I can add a delay of, let's say, 2 seconds, so that it waits 2 seconds when the page has been loaded and then does this stuff. And you could say it did that animation. But one thing that you might find an issue with is that it is not being smooth. Okay, so if I, let's say, I'll remove everything and do like 1000 in my X. This is only issue for Elementor. Okay, it is already there for some reason. Let me add delay, or you know what, I'll show you the Windows load function. So this one, I'll copy the top part, paste it at top, and then paste this one at the bottom. So any code that we add inside of this one would be running after the page has been loaded. So you see it was not simple. It was not linear. There was like weird speeding and all. It didn't start, it didn't feel smooth. You see, it just went like this. And that is because by default Elementor adds like this CSS styling to everything, which is like transition all. I think this is what Elementor adds to everything. So we just need to override it on whatever we are using GSAP, because our transition should be controlled by our GSAP and not our Elementor's CSS properties. So I'm just going to type DM square because this is what we are animating. Open curly bracket, and remember I'm doing it in style because we want to control the CSS. And here I'll type transition none and type important so that it overrides everything. So if I now do refresh, you could see it was smoother. It still uses ease, it's not like linear. So if I go to, let's say, docs again and go to eases, I don't think this one shows which one it is using. Okay, so this one is not showing, but just know that it is not going to be consistent speed because we haven't specified it, and by default it is using ease, I think. Also, we haven't set like duration and all. So this is how we just override the transition that Elementor adds so that we can control it with GSAP by adding transition none. And I add it to every single CSS class that we are controlling with GSAP. Another thing is, let's say if you were doing some like hover effect, which turns it to opacity 1 in your styling, and did I not type it right? Sorry, opacity 0. You could see that it is going instant, and you might not want that because you don't want to do GSAP for like simple animations like this hover effect, right? Because now we are just making the opacity 0 because we are using transition none. So what we can simply do is, if you are using CSS, if you are not familiar with it, I don't think it would be that of a bother. But basically, you don't want to do using JavaScript for like something that is as simple hover effect. So what you could do is you could type which effect you want to control. So I can type opacity and give it like 0.3 seconds, and that way it would work, and it would also like not mess with this stuff like this. And if you want to do multiple stuff, let's say if I was using something like scale 1.2, it's doing opacity 1. So is it not scaling? Why is it not scaling? So one thing I just realized that because I'm doing scale 2, it is not working because we are using GSAP, and I don't really know why that happens, because ideally I think this is something to do with Elementor issues, and because we are using Elementor which has added its own styling. Okay, it is working, but it is not working at the end. So there is some issue which is like overriding the GSAP library is overriding some of the styling. Okay, so let's say if you were adding scale and if you wanted to do like multiple stuff, you could do like scale 0.3 seconds, and you could add like different timings for each of this transition rather than adding like one single transition like this 0.3 seconds. If you do this, it would mess up with the code that is available here. The scale is not working because GSAP adds its own styling, I think, or it has to do with something with Elementor. And this is like one problem that I've faced, that lots of the time when I'm trying to edit something, Elementor has already did some styling which is overriding the styling that I've added in GSAP. So just remember that if you have added the code completely right and it's still not working, it might be some conflicting between Elementor and GSAP. So right now you could see if I added 0.3, it is not going consistent like this. See, because we wanted to control with GSAP. So I'm just going to do like opacity 0.3 so that it does not control everything, only does for opacity. So now that we have seen what the issue Elementor creates or what issue we can face, now let's just work with GSAP only so that we don't have to worry about the conflicting. And this one took actually longer time for me to like find the issues and like to figure out the solution, which is why I need to explain it to you so that you do not face the same issues like I face and your process is like much more faster than mine. So we did X 1000. If I do comma, I could do Y 50, that would make it go bottom. So if we do like 1000, it would make it go like bottom like this. So let's do preview and see. You could say it just went like randomly outside, and my transition is also working with opacity like this. Then we have rotate that I've already shown. We can do scale. it would scale like 2 times. So these are like 3 main properties that we usually use for animating, which is translating X and Y, rotating and scale, which is like pretty basic, you could see. And let me show you how from works now. So GSAP from, how it works. So if you check in our CSS, or if I remove this stuff, which is like GSAP, let's refresh this. This is my initial location, which is provided by Elementor, which is basically Elementor has added CSS to this one because this is a visual builder, right? And it basically creates the CSS for us. But even if you created your own CSS, it would be the initial location right now because we are using 2. So it goes to whatever state or whatever data that you have used, like opacity, scale, or whatever it is. It uses that as initial state if you're using GSAP 2. So whatever data that you add in GSAP 2 would be the final state, and whatever you have added via CSS or via Elementor page builder would be the initial state. But what about if I use from, right? So if we use from, let me refresh this. If I use from like this, now what's going to happen is this is going to turn into our initial state. So right now this one would be where it would start from, because it's from, and it would go to the initial location which you have set with Elementor, or it would go, or whatever you have set with CSS. So if I do refresh now, you could say it started from here and went there. One thing you might notice that it was for few seconds showing around here because like the page was getting loaded, and our code waits for the page load and then to run the animation, right? So by default it used like Elementor CSS, which is like Elementor whatever you have used, and then it uses from and goes back around here. The way to fix this is simply adding like opacity or something. So by default you could make like opacity 0, which is like I added around here DM square. I'll just remove this. You can see even though I'm doing some changes in here. Oh, okay, this was the wrong one. Opacity 0. Okay, so I can add opacity 0 and I can add like an opacity 1 in here, so that by default it would be hidden because Elementor CSS would load and then a JavaScript would load. And you could see it did do weird stuff, and that is because we have set from. My bad. So we will set this to, and if you saw the issue that just happened, which is right now it was opacity to 0 because we have set the initial opacity to 0. It is going to go from 1 to this opacity 0. Okay, so which is kind of getting confusing because it is going from opacity 1 to opacity 0, which is what we don't want, because we want it to go from opacity 0 to opacity 1 like this. But that would mean one issue that we just faced, which is it would be initially visible like this. You see that? That's why it's better to use 2 based on your whatever it is. For example, if this was at bottom somewhere, we wouldn't have faced that issue. And the reason is because our page has been getting loaded, so this square gets added, then the CSS gets added, and then our JavaScript gets added. So in the time where our CSS and JavaScript, which is like this GSAP, is getting loaded, it is already showing us this opacity 1. You could see. So this issue would not be an problem if this was at the bottom, because it would not be visible around here like this. And you could use like preloader, or you could do some more stuff to fix that, but usually 2 is what we use. Even if I go to my page, which is like DM animated GSAP template, you could see for a few seconds it would be showing all those elements and then it would go hidden, which is why you would see that lots of the sites actually use like preloaders or something to do with opacity 0, or just style it somewhere. Okay, so that would not be an issue if this was not on the first page. So now that we have learned what to and from does, basically to takes it to whatever data you have added here. From is what you show initially around here, and whatever it is added in your CSS or your visually building via Elementor would be your initial location or final location based on whether you have used this one or not. So if you use from, whatever you have used on your Elementor or your styling would be the final location, and if you use to, whatever you add around here would be the final location, and whatever you have added around here would be your initial location. Just test it out, just try it out yourself, you'll understand it pretty easily. Next stuff that I want to explain to you is delay, duration, and ease. So right now I'm just going to switch to 2 because that one works like the better way. From is usually not used much commonly, I think. So let me just do this. I'll also remove the opacity, and right now you could see that our code actually works like instantly, right? So as soon as the page loads, it instantly works. I've already showed you what delay does, but I'll show you again like this. So it instantly works. But if I add, let's say, a delay of 5 seconds, it would wait for 5 seconds and then load the animation. So let's wait. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see what's the issue. Not sure. Let's just try it again. It could be just publishing issue. So let's try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think maybe I'm calculating it wrong because the page has not been loaded, I think. But you could see we have added a delay. If I remove this Windows onload function, it would actually do based on like 5 seconds. But right now our code is waiting for a whole page to load, and then it's doing that. So you could see it waits for this and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that, and then does the animation. Let's do is add a duration of 5 seconds. So right now we were not adding any duration, but right now I have added 5 duration, which would mean that it would take 5 seconds to do or go from one initial location to the final location like this. That's pretty easy to explain. I'm not going to go in detail, but duration basically controls how long it's going to be. So it waits for 2 seconds and then does it for 5 seconds, the animation. Then we have ease. Okay, so ease is how the animation should go. So if I go to easing around here, if I click on none, check this ball. Okay, so you could see right now that it is going in constant speed like this. If I use power 1, it starts fast and then it slows down at the end. If we do in and out, it slowly starts and it slowly stops like this. Power 4 out is like more like this. If it just do out, it would be faster and it would be slower at the end. If we do in, it would slowly start and then fastly progress at the top. So there are like multiple different stuff that you could do. You could see, and you could even create like custom ease around here like this. If you have used any editing software, you will know how this works. And then just copy this part into your ease function. But how do you add ease? So we type ease first, then in our single colon, I'll type none, and that would give us a linear speed. Okay, because none means to use linear speed. So you could see it is slowly going. It's not speeding up, it's not slowing down like this. I'm going to remove the delay so we can see it instantly. So that is the ease. And then if we do power 1 out, which is just copy this part like this and paste it in your ease. Make sure no comma at the end, because this is our last property, right? Whatever is the last property should not have the comma at the end. So this is like not much noticeable. If we use power 1, power 4 out, let's type power 4 out and then see. So power 4 out, is it O capital? No, O is not capital. Remember, we are using JavaScript, so it needs to be perfectly right. Okay, so if something is capital, it should be capital. If something is not capital, it should not be capital. So you see it started fast and then slowed down at the end. So that is how we use ease. Pretty easy to do. And if you use custom ease, just copy this property and then add it to your GSAP. Next thing, we are going to learn that how we can control any CSS property. Okay, so let me just copy this part, which is this one. Let me copy it and paste it in here. I also need to add my GSAP library again because I deleted the previous one. So just give me a second to add it again because I deleted the previous one. You know what I'm just going to do is create an HTML around here. add it inside of this one. Let's do responsive hidden, so it's hidden, and then I had it in my editor. So right now I don't need to always delete and add it again and again. Just remember that if you are seeing any issues, type inspect, go into console, and here you would see any issues that you are facing, and then you could type in your, if you have Copilot or in ChatGPT engine, and then ask what this error is about. It would be shown on red in the console. Okay, so right now you could see we will use to, and this one does not work with from. Okay, because with Elementor there's some issue with from for like I think text elements. So remember to use to for text elements, and if you want to use from, then basically you will need to code it yourself by using HTML widget and then using div CSS, which is like pretty basic HTML CSS. Okay, it's not like any complicated, but because we're using HTML widget, which is like this heading widget, it adds its own styling, which kind of overrides our GSAP styling. So if you go in here, you could see I have added like no styling in here. So if I click clear, it shows this one. But sometimes if you are using any global widget, if you have done some site settings, this one might not be possible to do. Okay, if you click clear, it might not actually be clear, which kind of makes it like annoying to do, because I wish there was an option which was just clear. But let's just do with this one and explain to you. So I'll call it, let's say, DM text. I don't know what this I have called, just in case I do not mess it up. Okay, so I'll call it DM text. You can call it anything. And then I'm going to, let's just duplicate. Let's just delete this one like this. So in style, I'm going to type .dm text transition none important, right? Because we are controlling it with GSAP. I'm going to go in here and then type GSAP 2 .dm text comma open curly bracket. This one, let's do color. I want it to be red. Remember, I cannot just type red. I need to type in single quotation. I'll add a duration of 2 seconds like this. Maybe add a delay of 2 seconds, because I'm not using Windows onload function in this one, so I'll just add a delay for time being. This is not a good way to use. Okay, so you do not actually use delay. It's better to use Windows onload. Delay is for like use for something different stuff, specifically for like timeline or stuff like that. So you could see nothing actually happened, and the reason why is right now we are using H2 around here. Okay, so if I turn this to, let's say, P, let's do preview, and you could see it turned to red because we use P, but we don't always use P, right? Because we want to use for SEO, like H1, H2 is for SEO. So if you are using H2 or anything else, you will simply go to your text and then type H2 like this. Oops, like space H2. And inside of this one, I'll type space H2 like this. Let's do preview and see. And yeah, you could see it turned to red. And then if you want to add any specific color around here, let's say blue, and I'll type important, because if I type important around here, it overrides the styling that is added by by Elementor. Let's see if that works. So seems like adding important just does not work with Elementor for some reason. And I'm pretty much sure if I had like this empty like this, and then if this was like not important like this, it would work. So it's blue right now, and it turns to red. Also not sure why not every one of them was like blue. Why is on, okay, because I cleared this one only and not this one. Let me just try with adding important to both of this one. And this is something to do with Elementor, okay? It's not to do with GSAP, which is why there's like a lot more issues with making like GSAP and making sure it works nicely. So you could say it's not turning into red. like this. So that could be one issue that you might face when using like important. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Ideally, if this issue keeps persisting, then you will need to use like HTML widget and create it yourself via HTML, CSS, and JavaScript like this, rather than using HTML widget. So this is how we control changing this color. But right now I also want to show you, if I, let's say, copy this and then paste it again, and let's say I want to do this and change this to orange. You could add any hash value to. Okay, I will add a delay of 4 seconds like this. Let's see what happens. So right now there will be 2-second delay, and then after 4 seconds it would change this to second color. So let's see, it changes to red, and after 4 seconds it changes to orange, which is pretty cool, right? So you could do like animations like this by using delay, but there's a reason why we do not use delay always, because then makes it like much more easier to do. Okay, right now if we had like lots of elements, like 10 elements, and then creating delay like 2 seconds, then 4 seconds, then 10 seconds, which would be kind of annoying because you need to calculate it, right? Because right now the way it works is that when this content is loaded, it waits for 2 seconds, and after that, in the 2 seconds, it changes from white to red. That is 4 seconds, and after that 4 seconds, we are saying that use this delay. So if you don't understand, if this was the timeline of our text, this is where it turns to red, like this one, or let's do like this. So right now it is waiting for 2 seconds because we have added a delay of 2 seconds, and in that 2 seconds after that one, like this, it is changing to red color. So right now here it is the red color from white color. Okay, so it's going from white to red around here, which means that its duration, which is this for orange one, we have to add a 4 second of delay like this, because this delay is not calculating from here. It's not being like 4 second delay from here. Okay, it is calculating the delay from the initial load, and then from 4 seconds it is going to do like seconds going to take to turn from red to orange like this, which is why it is kind of annoying to use delay, and that's why we use timeline, which automatically calculates this for us. So if you keep adding more stuff, then you will need to do like 6 second delay, calculate the duration and all, because we need to calculate like 2 second of delay, 2 second of duration. So it's kind of complicated to explain, but it's not much complicated to understand. I think I'm making it a bit harder to explain. So let's just delete this one and let's get to the next part. Next is like clip path reveal. So let me just copy this in here and do clip path. So there's a reason why I want to show you clip path. See, any CSS property can be edited, okay? And any CSS property means like transform, origin, clip path, anything that is available in here can be edited. But right now we are using CSS. In CSS we type clip path by typing clip dash path, right? But JavaScript we cannot add like dash, because in JavaScript dash actually means minus, because we can actually type stuff like constant equal to constant a equal to 2 minus 5. So JavaScript thinks that minus is actually, or dash is actually minus, and because it can actually do mathematical calculations, which is why we do not use dash. So what would you do if you cannot use dash? We simply make, let's say if we were using transform, origin, clip path like this, what we can simply do is we can type normally and then make the next letter capital. So transform, origin like this. So you could see anything after dash, we are making it as origin. So if we had something else after this, we will just capitalize it. Okay, so like this. So just remember that one thing. That's one reason why I wanted to show clip path, and it is also like common effect which we use to create this animation. It is kind of messing it up in the editor, right? So as long as it works in the live page, it's good. So I'll just call it as like DMIMG or reveal. Let me check. Okay, let's just duplicate this one. Let's close this. Let's close this. And I'm going to do GSAP. Oh, sorry, not GSAP. DM image. I'm going to give it transition none important, and then I'm going to give it a clip path. If you go to this site, which is Bennett Felly Clippy, let's go to, let's say, parallelogram. Why not? Let's try a different one. I can simply copy this one and then paste it in my clip path like this, and it would do this this clip path. Okay, but what if I want this to be going from this full location to this clip location? So for this one, I'm using from. You could use to, it's totally okay, but I just want to show both of this as we progress. So I'll type dm image, let's do comma, open bracket, close it, and inside of this I'll type clip path, and here in the quotation, because we are not just using number, I'll make this polygon. Okay, so if you guys don't know how this works, this part is like this one, the green is this one obviously, and this is this one, this is this one. I can just make this one to be like 50-50 like this, because I know that 50% and 50% is what you call in the middle. So I can just make everything like 50-50%. So I just copy this polygon, copy it in here, and do like 50. Everything should be like 50-50, because that just means it's in center. I should actually just copy this in a notepad because it's easier to see. Let's do 50. Let's do 50. Let's do 50. If you want to learn more of this in detail, how clippath works, I actually have like the video just showcasing about this one. Okay, so let's do and see what it does. And you could see it started from center and went at top like this, which is pretty cool, right? And for like the normal basic stuff, let me just reset this. You simply need to keep it like this for like bottom reveal, and make this point at the bottom, and make this point at the bottom, and then add it. Sometimes when you use like this editor, it might not do perfectly, so that way, that time you need to remember how it works, so that you could manually add this value, because you might just think, oh, I just did this stuff, I just need to copy paste. Sometimes it might not work because the points gets like changed because the way this guy has made this editor. So you just need to know a bit of clip path, which is basically easy to understand. You could check the whole video. And then all the same, rest of it is same. You could add duration, delay, and a lot more cool stuff. So I'm just going to skip this. Let's go to our Stagger, which is pretty cool. Let's do paste. And for Stagger, let's just add a text around here. I'll call it like DM Stag, I think. Let's do DM Stag, and let's do DM Stag like this. Let's duplicate my HTML editor. Let's delete this. Let's delete this. Let's give our DM Stag transition none. Important like this. Now let's say if I want to do, I'll do color blue, something like this. It is not overriding it simply because this one is H2. So let's do H2. If you are using anything else, you will type that H3, H4, anything. So this is blue in color. And remember, this one only works if I have kept this as empty. But if you are using like site settings and making like global settings, then it messes it up. I don't know how to fix that. And I'm going to type GSAP from. Usually you would type 2. Okay, I would very much suggest to always use 2 instead of from most of the time. But for this one, from is necessary, because this is the initial location that we want to reach. So ideally we would use from, because this is the initial location that we want to be, right? Because 2 allows us to take it to different location, and from allows us to use like a different location and take it to the initial location. So this is the initial location. If you want to use 2 instead of from, you will need to do some changes like transform, translate. I'll do, let's say, 0 pixels and then 20 pixels at the bottom, and then you could use 2 to make it go to 0 pixels, okay, in transform. But for now, I'll just use from. Let's do DM Stag. Let's do stuff like this, and let's do opacity 0. Let's do duration of, I guess, 2 seconds. And right now I also want to do some color changes, so let's make it like, I guess, red. Why not? Let's first see how this looks. So we need to make sure it is set to H2 around here, else the color would not work. So you could see, because we are using from, it was actually in red, but because we have also used opacity, it's not visible. But then I'm going to do is I'm going to add Y of 50 like this. I'll just remove the color, it's unnecessary, I think, just to preview. And you could see it went from 50 to 0 like this. But right now I want to create it to be staggering effects. So all you need to type is stagger and add some difference. So for 0.2, so every 0.2 seconds, so every 0.2 seconds it would run the animation. So let's see that. Or there would be 0.2 seconds of difference in each animation like this. If we do something like 1 second, it would be like too much of a difference. You see, this is how we can do stagger animation. If I want to do, let's say 2, and if I change this, I want, let's say I did 2, okay? Let's just see what happens. See, this is the issue that happens. For that, what we need to do is the final location. So 2 is the final location, right? So final location, we want opacity to be 1. Our Y should be 0. And here we will type transform, translate 0 pixels and then 20 pixels. And our opacity should be, I guess, 0, because it will go from this to this. And you see, we got the same animation. So based on what you want to use, you will need to do some changes, and whether you want to decide to use to and from is up to you. And sometimes using to makes it easier, and sometimes using from makes it easier, but it doesn't really matter. You could use both. It just one of them would increase the steps a bit, but if that works better, then use that. Now let's learn the next part, which is repeat animation. It's pretty easy. It's just one step. So let's just copy this. So right now this one, we will just add a, I guess, DM square again. Let's duplicate this one. Let's delete this, delete this. I'm showing this again and again so that it like gets into your head, like every step that we need to do commonly for Elementor. If you were not using Elementor, you would not have to worry about like doing transition and all. I'll do GSAP 2. And let me know if I'm making the video like a bit complicated than I should be, because I'm trying to explain it as I go, and I'm not like able to think constantly, I think, in the right way. I'll do X 500, so it goes there. I'll do is none. I'll do duration of 2 seconds. I guess I don't want delay. Okay, so this is what it is added. So it will go from this location to this location. And if I type Yoyo equal to true, what this would do is it would go from the initial location to final, then final to initial, like this. But we need to still do some more steps. So you could say it didn't actually work. And that is because before we type Yoyo, let me just delete Yoyo and type repeat 2. Let's try repeat 2. Okay, I typed repeat equal to 2, or this quotation 2 or double dot 2. So it went from this to this, and it went back and it this to this. It should be doing 2 times, but I think the page refreshed or something, or I think it does like 3 times because it adds extra. I don't know, but it is repeating 2 extra times over the first one. I think that's how it works. I haven't used like repeat a lot, so this is the first one. The second one, I think it does like 2 extra times, but I don't want it 2 extra times. I want it constantly, so I'll do -1. and let's do preview. And -1 basically means that keep repeating. Okay, and once we do that, we can type yoyo equal to true. Let's see what happens. It goes back like this. So it goes from initial to final question. If we type like 2 in repeat, not -2, just 2, let's do preview. It goes back. I don't know how many bounces it would be because I've never used. Okay, so it was like this one. So you can see how you can like create this animation. Pretty easy to understand, nothing complicated. So let's get to the next part. Timeline, a very important concept. So I'm just going to add it like this. So to explain to you how timeline works, we are going to give this one as a class of, I guess, DM logo. I just want to make sure I do not like mess it up. Okay, so DM logo, DM heading, because if I accidentally type like the same CSS class as this one, it might not work. And then I'll type like DM para. Let me confirm. Okay, so I haven't messed it up. So DM heading, DM para, and DM logo. I'm going to duplicate this one. Let's delete everything. Let's delete everything like this. I'm going to type all of that stuff, which is DM logo dot DM para and then DM heading. Oops. I'll do transition, none important. This is a quick way to apply the transition to every single stuff, but sometimes if you are doing like more CSS stuff, it would be better to create like 3 different properties and then rather than having like one single stuff like this. So we will do like simple animation. So GSAP 2, or let's do from for our DM logo. Let's open it and let's do, let's say Y equal to 50 like this, and let's do opacity 0. So it goes from opacity 0 and let's add a duration of 2 seconds. So this, okay, 2 seconds is too much. Let's do 0.5. Okay, so this is how it does. It is a bit buggy right now because we are in editor, but in the live page it should work. I'm just going to copy this one like this much. Oops, this much, and then do paste and then do paste because I want to now change it for DM heading and then I want to do for DM para. Okay, like this. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do X -50 for my heading. You don't need to do this. I'm just showing like random stuff that we could do. And for Y, I'll also do, I guess I'll keep Y also 50. So if I do preview changes, let's see what we see right now. Let's see, let me refresh. And you could see all 3 of them happen together. It's not ideal, right? And obviously we could play with delay, but then for delay you will need to calculate. So for example, this is 0.5 seconds, so we'll need to add delay of 0.5 seconds, and this one would have like delay of 0.5, this duration 0.5, 0.5, and then 0.5. So it would be 1.5 delay. It would get kind of complicated to understand using delay always, like if you have 10 different elements. So what we can do is we can create a timeline, and to create a timeline is very easy. We just type constant, it is like basic JavaScript, and we will name our timeline something. So I'll call it as like DM timeline. Okay, if you don't know in JavaScript, we can type however we want, like DM like this, but if anything is capital, it should be capital. But usually right practice to write JavaScript is to type like this and then making the first word capital. That way it's easy to read. So like timeline step is working, stuff like that. So making first letter capital is like what we usually do to make it easy to read. So we type constant DM timeline equal to GSAP.timeline and bracket. And you could actually add like lot more stuff for the GSAP timeline settings inside this what you call this curly brackets. I'm not going to do that. I think we do not type constant. Let's type let. So that I don't know if constant would work, but let's just type let. Let's do let and then add it like this. So right now created a timeline for GSAP whose name is DM timeline. You could name it anything, but I have just created a timeline named DM timeline. And instead of GSAP from, we'll use our timeline name. So we will type timeline, DM timeline, and then DM timeline. So it would automatically do this stuff. So it knows that this part is of the DM timeline. So let's just see. So why is it not working? Okay, so the reason why it was happening is because I've already created like an HTML and I've named it same. You could see the previous example, I've created DM timeline. So it is getting overridden, which is like not right because the name is same. You could see the previous timeline that is for this one is called DM timeline. So let me just name it like, I guess, DM timeline 2 or something, and hope it works right now. So make sure when you create different timelines to have different names, else it would like lead to this issue. So you could see it does the first animation, then the second animation, and then the third animation without us having to control it. But we are not done with timeline. There is like very cool stuff about timeline. So I'm just going to do is add Y50 for every single thing. Make the duration to be like 1 second. Let's update and see how it looks. So you can see each one takes 1 second. But how about I want this one to be a bit faster rather than, for example, I don't want this one to wait that much time. It should be a bit faster. What I could do is inside this one. So if I, let's say, copy this and then paste it in here. So let's say if I want my paragraph to be a bit faster than this one, I could go into this one between this curly bracket and what it is, the curve bracket, do comma, open this single quotation or double quotation if you want, to minus equal to 0.5. So what this would do is this animation would run 0.5 seconds faster in this timeline, or it would just do negative 0.5. Okay. So rather than it waiting it for to completely finish this animation, it would be 0.5 faster. So let's just see. How about I just do 1, and that way it would be like easy to see. It would just be like at the equal timing if I do just 1. You see it is now coming together because I did 1, which is like the same duration as the previous one. So if you type 0.5, if you do plus equal to, it will take like much more time. Negative is usually what you would use to make it like look nicer. But what if I do is, let's say if I created like another timeline like this, and then this timeline should run after this one, right? But it would not actually calculate that it was running minus 0.5 faster. So remember that thing. It would not think that, okay, it was running 0.5 faster. I think so. I'm not 100% sure about this one. But I think the GSAP timeline does not check that the previous animation was running 0.5 faster. So we should load it faster. It would still wait like the full time. It would work. This animation would work as if this element was not even there. Basically, this one would think that you haven't added this value. So what you need to do is you need to simply keep adding this one to the next ones like this, so that it gets like equally spaced again. You would play around with it to find it. And then another thing, let me just delete this one, else the code would not work. Like I showed you, a timeline works like this, right? So let's say this is our timeline. First one is our logo, which is for, let's say, 1 second. Then this is our heading for our second. And then the third one is our paragraph. but our paragraph starts like 0.5 faster. I removed the code, but think of it is still there, so our paragraph would be like 0.5 seconds faster. So like this. So this is like 1 second, this is 1 second, and our paragraph is 1 second, like this. But remember, as I said, that it does not calculate. So our next timeline would actually start from here. It does not actually take in consideration that we actually moved this timeline on the left side. So our next animation would run around here. But another thing is, let's say if I want to control the animation much more in like have much more control. So what I could do is I could decide when the animation runs in this timeline. So if this was my timeline, I could say that my logo should run at the it should load instantly like this, or maybe let's do like this. So when our timeline starts, I want my logo animation to start when it is 2 seconds in our timeline, like this. And I can set that our heading should be like at 6 seconds, and our what it is like this paragraph should be at 8 seconds. I could set that. Okay, so that is pretty easy. You just type comma. So instead of using like this double quotation and all, we just simply type a value. So if I want this animation to run at like 1 second in the timeline, oops, we can type 1, 2, 3, whatever we want. So I'm just going to say that this animation should run at 2 seconds like this in the timeline. Think of it as video editing, where you are just moving that clip in 2 seconds in future. So you see I moved that in 2 seconds. And obviously this one was waiting, so let's just do 1 second for the second one. Let's see what happens. You see this one popped up first and then this one popped, because we made it that this animation in the timeline should run at 1 second and this one should run at 2 seconds. And that way we can actually control more stuff. Like if I do 4 and if I do, let's say 6, in the timeline this one would run when it is at 2 seconds, it would run at 4 seconds, and this one would run at 6 seconds. So it would not even wait for the previous one, because you have added like a specific value. So 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 6 seconds. So each one of them have 2 seconds of difference. So that is one thing that you need to know about the timeline, and that is all for the timeline. And it just allows you to create like cool stuff. One of the example, if I want to show you, is this modern menu template that I'm working on. It is going to be paid, but there would be like free code and free YouTube tutorial on how to make this. So when I click on this, we could say it works like this. So first it waits for it to scale. Once it's scaled, then it runs these animations. Same with this one. It waits for this scaling animation to happen, and then this timeline works. So you could do like cool stuff with timeline. Next thing, we are going to learn a very important concept, which is called ScrollTrigger. Remember that the ScrollTrigger would only work if we had added the second ScrollTrigger stuff, which is the script, else it would not work. So till now, even if we have not added this script, it would have still worked. But ScrollTrigger is something that makes the animation only work when it's in our screen, or we can also control a lot more stuff. It's not just for like animation on screen. And I'm also going to try to give like basics of it, because it is also like very big. So the common stuff I'm just going to explain. Okay, so let's go and copy this. Let's paste it in our page. So this is what I'm going to call as, I don't know, like DMMove. Let me duplicate this. Let's remove this. Let's remove this. Let me type .move transition none important. Okay, that is the common stuff that we did. So right now I want to do some stuff like let's do GSAP 2, our common animation, which is DMMove. There we go. X equal to 500, duration 5. Okay, so that is all we need to do. So let me just update and see what if the animation is working or not before we proceed. Yep, it is now taking 5 seconds to go till here. But if I just make a big container on the top so that it is not on our screen instantly, let's give it a try and see. Okay, it is not on screen. If I scroll down, the animation has already been completed. So how we can add a scroll trigger to our stuff is, let me just copy this in our notepad so that it is visible. So the way we add scroll trigger is, if we go into our docs, let me just see if they have anything around here. Yep, there it is. So you can get some information in here in the docs where there's like a lot more stuff, but I'll need to explain it slowly because this is a bit it's going to take like a bit to understand, but it's very easy to like implement. So the way we type scroll trigger is by typing scroll trigger. Make sure T is capital. Then we open our double dots. Then we open our curly bracket and close our curly bracket. Okay. So anything inside of this would be the data of our scroll trigger. So like what element should trigger the animation, when it should trigger, when it should be on our viewport, at what part. For example, if I want this animation to only load when it is in the middle, if I want it to load when it is at the top, and stuff like that. So anything that we add in our scroll trigger is going to be the data of it. So let me just remove everything like this. So what is in scroll trigger? In scroll trigger, we have to specify our trigger. Okay, and trigger is usually going to be the same element as this one, but it can be different based on your requirements. So for example, let's say if I want my trigger to be, let's say if when this element reaches like this point, I want the animation to run. So that would be easy. But what if I want this animation to run when this element reaches in the middle? That way we can control it via trigger. So we can add like different trigger elements, but usually in most common cases you will be using the same one, which is this one, which is .dmmove, right? So we can simply type this double dot and type .dmmove. So this is going to be our trigger thing. Let's do comma, let's do enter, and then we will type start. And the way start works is, I'll explain it sooner, but let me just type something so that I can show you guys a bit more. Let me do, I guess, stuff like this. Why not? Don't worry if you are not understanding it, I'll explain it soon. This is scroll trigger, and that's all. Let me copy this. And where do you type scroll trigger, you need to know. Scroll trigger is same as this properties like X, duration, opacity, clip path, delay, anything that we have learned, it is same as that. You could see the first part is same as that. So we are just saying that in this element, which is like this element, there are like this many stuff that we need to see. So we will type scroll trigger. So one thing, I'll add comma, you could see, and type scroll trigger, and then open bracket, close curly bracket, and then I can just simply just copy and paste this. You don't need to worry about start and end yet. I'll explain sooner. Okay, so this is what we have added into our scroll trigger. One thing that you need to follow is we do not add comma at the end of the last element. And remember, this is same as adding X, duration and all, which means that we do not add comma here. But let's see, if I wanted to add more stuff like this, let's say opacity, I'll need to add a comma at the end around here because this is not the final element, right? So ideally, just do one thing, just make the scroll trigger always be at the end. That way you don't have to worry about it of adding a comma at the end or not. So if I just type opacity 0 and I'll add comma because then our scroll trigger is here. But if our scroll trigger was at top, then we would have to add a comma around here, and then because that is not the last element, and that way opacity would be at the bottom. Okay, I'm just checking if my stuff is working or not. So I have done this stuff. Let me just see what happens if it's working or not. If I go down, you could see the animation is still not working. It would work when it's in center, and I'll show you how that is controlled by. So remember, we have added the trigger to be the same as this element. To see what we are doing, I'm going to type markers inside my ScrollTrigger. You could say it shows around here. One important thing that I want you to know is that, let's say if you change start and end and you have markers true, it would not show accurate in your editor, because if you keep changing this value, it forgets. It does not removes the older values. It shows the, like, it would keep like showing multiple values like this. Just remember that. Always check it in your live page when you're adding markers. Just ignore this one. So you could see right now how this scroller start and scroller end is, and if I go down, you could see we have start and end around here like this. So as soon as my start touches this one, it runs this animation. You don't have to worry about end yet. In the future you might, but for now we just work about start. End is usually good for scrub, or if when you like cross it and want to replay the animation, then we use end. I'm not going to teach you much about it in this video because it would get like too big, but it's very basic to understand. Okay, so here's what it is doing. Okay, so we have set my trigger to be DM move, which is this element. If I, let's say, add a background, it would be easy to see. Okay, there we go. Let me refresh. So make sure you understand this concept a lot nicer. Okay, so you could see that as of now I have set my trigger to be DM move, which is this one, and then we have start and then end. The first value actually controls where our trigger point on this element should be. So right now I have set my start to be 50%, right? So it is at the middle of it, like this start point. Don't worry about end anymore. So it is 50% of this size. So it is in the center of this one. Let's see if it's actually in center or not. Let's just confirm it. So if I do this, you could see right now it is perfectly in center, because the first element controls where our trigger point is in this element, in our trigger, or trigger start is in this element. So what that means is that whenever this point touches this point, the animation would work. But what is this point? It is the second value. The second value is our viewport point. So where is it on our screen? So if we check this, let me delete. If this is my screen like this, and if I create like why did it turn to this one? Okay, I don't use paint, so I don't know what I'm doing. And this is my element like this. Our trigger point for start is, or the second value, which is this one, controls where our start point and end point should be. So this is 0%, the top is 0%, the bottom is 100%. So obviously if we do like in the here, it would be 20, this in the center it would be 50, 80, like this 70 and 60. So this is how it does. And ScrollTrigger does have some issue. If you try to use like same element with two different ScrollTrigger with the same values, it would like do some issues. So just type in ChatGPT and it would like show you what the issue is. But if you're doing for one or two elements, it's not going not one or two elements, but basically how to explain. Let me quickly go okay, let me quickly go up. Okay, there you could see we are controlling the same element twice, right, in this one. So first we change it to from white to, or we change the opacity, and then we change to orange. We shouldn't have same ScrollTrigger for same or for both of this, because it can confuse it, because it is on the same element. And usually it would work, but as long as the points are, or start and end points are not same. This is like in future you might face some issue, which is why I'm saying, but you will not face some issues if you are doing like some simple animations. It's usually when we are trying to do some complicated stuff. So that's good. That's just one good thing to know. So this is the second value. So whatever we add in our second value, you could see the scroller start is going to be at 50%, which is half of the screen, and this is 20%, so it is at 20% of the screen. Then what is the first value? First value is based on our trigger content. If this is my DM move, this would be 0%, this would be 100%, and in the center it would be 50%. So just remember that the first value is for the trigger, whichever it is, and the second is the viewport. And basically we are saying that when this value, which is this start value, that like touches this scroller start, run the animation. So let me just refresh and let's see it again. Okay, let me refresh above. Okay, if I go down slowly, you could see nothing's happening, and as soon as the start touches, you would see it's not happening when I touch end. If I go like this, and it starts the animation. So that is one thing that you need to know about the start and end. Okay, and markers are good to keep it on. Now another thing is this trigger, this start and end value uses this trigger, right? But what if you wanted to have a different trigger point for our end? Okay, so let me just duplicate this one. Let me make this, I guess, DM move 2. I'm going to give this like a background of different color, like green. Okay, so what I can type is I can go in here and type end trigger. My end trigger I want to be .dm move to like this, and let me just do like 50% of that element, of the second element. Let's see what happens. Let me copy this. Let's see. Hopefully it works. Let's go down. Okay, nothing's working, so I did mess something up. So yeah, comma around here. You could see now there's like too many stuffs around here in the editor, which is why it's kind of annoying to work with editor with markers. These are all wrong, by the way. It does not remove the older one, which is why it looks confusing. So you need to refresh to reset it or something. So you could see my start trigger is around here like this, and my end trigger is at the half point of this one like this. And that way we could have like two different end triggers and all. And for this one, I don't think I can find it anymore. I need to like find in the docs, I think. So you could see there's like a lot more stuff like end trigger, and I want to do like play. Yep, this one. So there is like toggle actions which allows you to do, let's say, when we touch like the end point. So let's say if I scroll down, let me like remove this one completely, and let me remove the end trigger completely because I want to use this trigger. Let's do end. We could do like 50-50 for this one too. Let's do update. So right now scroller and start it's at the same point, and then the viewport is also at the same point. You could see as soon as I touch this, it does this animation. And what we can do is when we go up like this and the end touches, we can like reverse the animation or play it again. And that way we need to use toggle actions. I'm not going to teach this in this video because there's like a lot more stuff and it's kind of confusing. So here you could see we could play, pause, resume, or reset, or play it in reverse and stuff. So you could see reverse, pause, resume and stuff. So we could actually do some stuff like if we scroll back, it reverses the animation, or if we like leave this part, it should reverse the animation or like reset it or play it again, stuff like that, in case you do not want to like set it in piece. Because right now you could see if I go down, the animation is completed, so it's not going to replay again when I go up like this. So that's why we use toggle actions. I'm not going to teach that today. So that is ScrollTrigger, which makes the animation run when it is on our screen. So next thing is scrub, which is the animation when we like scroll on a scroll base, and this one does require us to use end. You could see it's all over the place around here. Let me copy this. So what I'll do is I'll do my start at 50% of this trigger and then end also at 50% of this trigger. It's totally okay. But I want my viewport start to be around, let's say 80. So which would be around here 80. And then the end should be around 20. So it would be around here 20. And then if I paste this, you could see that because some error is happening, there is like an uncaught error transition, or not transition, like some error with an unexpected token that you will need to find around here. Let's check it out now. If you want to get rid of all this, you just need to refresh the editor. So right now you could see my start is here, end is here, and right now it does the animation as soon as we touch. But if I go in here and type scrub true, make sure it's comma because it's not the end element. Let's do update. Let's go down. And you can see the animation. So this is where the animation would start and this is where it would end. So you could see this is how we can just do scrub. So this would be the final location, this would be our initial location, and this is based on our scroll. So if you want to do scroll based animations, scrub is the way to do pretty nice and cool animations. For this one we do not need like duration and all, I think, because it is completely based on like this area. We do not need to do delay, duration and all. Next we are going to learn is pin. And pin I've not used much often, so I'm going to hope that it works nicely, and I need to like check it once, the code, because I don't remember. I'm also going to refresh this page to get rid all of this stuff. So I'm just going to copy this pin again to my page. And pin is also like, there's a lot more stuff that you could do, like horizontal scrolling and all with pin, but I'm just going to show like the big one. So this one I'm just going to call, let me just see what I've done in here, GSAP pin. So that is what I've done. So in this one I'm just going to call it as DM pin. You could call it anything, DM pin, and let's call this one as DM pin. Okay, let's duplicate this one. Let me delete all of this stuff. Let's delete all of this stuff. So first thing first, we need to type DM pin and do transition, none important. Next we type our GSAP animations. So GSAP, we type 2 or from, it doesn't really matter, I think, for from and to for this one, but I'll just use 2 because that's like better one. Let's open this. Let's do, right now we do not really need to have like opacity and all, but if you want to do that, but for this one I'm just going to type ScrollTrigger, open the curly brackets, close it, and then in here we will type our trigger point. So trigger is going to be our .dm pin, like this. So this is the one that we want to control. So I'll do start, I'll do 50% of this middle content and then 50% of the viewport. I'll do end at, so for start I did let's do like 80% for now. I'll explain what I'm doing, but right now it would start when the trigger point in the middle, it touches this start point at 80%, and the end would be also 50, and then let's do 20%. Let's do scrub equal to true, and let's enable our markers to true. Let's just check what happens first. Obviously nothing would happen because we haven't added any animation. So you could see I'll add some stuff around here so that we can scroll below. So the thing is we need to do is type pin true, like this. And if you want, you can actually type what element you want to pin instead of like adding in quotation like this, the pin element, if you want. It doesn't really have to be like just true. true would use like whatever element you are using in GSAP. So you could see as soon as this start touches this one, it is like pinned to that area. But now we are facing another issue, which is we need to actually do query selector all. So when we are using pin or like ScrollTrigger and stuff, it is only going to work for the first element like this. Okay, so this one does not work with all of the same, what you call, if we have 3 of the same class, it does not work. For that we need to use something about a bit of JavaScript. So what we are going to do is we can simply type constant DMPin. We can name anything around here. Okay, so I'm just going to create a constant, basically creating a box, like creating an empty box whose box name is DMPin. I'll type document query selector. So what it is doing when we type query selector, this is like basic JavaScript. Okay, in our document we are storing anything that has the class dot DMPin. Okay, so this is basic JavaScript. It is very commonly used for like GSAP 2 if you want to do like multiple stuff. So what we simply now did is we took everything that is in our document which has the class DMPin and added in our box DMPin. Okay, but this one actually only does like adds the first element. We need to actually type all around here, and if we do all, what it does is that it finds every element in your page which has the class DMPin and stores it in a box. Here you could name anything. Okay, you could name box1 or anything, but it's easier for me to know what it is when we type the name like similar. So DMPin, we cannot add any dash and all around here. And then we need to do is we need to type DMPin for each, because we want to do for every single element. Okay, so what every element that is stored in this one, for each of them I will open a bracket and I'll name anything. You can name anything that you want. So I'll call it as like DMPin element. Do close the bracket, and then I think we need to do like this. I'm not sure. Let me just check it once. Okay, so it is correct. So this is how we do. Okay, so we type a random name, and then so what we simply do is for each element, right? So right now we created a box named DMPin. We took everything in our document which has the CSS class.DMPin, and for that one, in that box, we do like for each of that content or for each of this pin, we want to do something, and we name it something around here like DMPin, or you could name it anything. But basically, you use it to control like we use this to just basically do it for each and every element like this. So it will store the first thing in this box into this one, and then we will do something stuff. If you don't understand, just remember to add a name around here, and then from now on we need to type DM element as our trigger point. So to show you before that, let's say if I didn't want to type like say dot pin, okay, and if I typed let's say constant DMPin equal to document query selector like this, and remember I'm not doing all, I'm doing query selector without typing all. That would mean that it will only take the first one in the document, basically in our page. And instead of adding like dot DMPin, I can simply just type this one DMPin around here. Okay, so without adding the quotation marks. And I can also do like change the trigger to the DMPin. Do you think that would work or not? Let's see. So if I go down, you could see it is already working, even though I haven't typed .dmpin. I've stored this dmpin in a box dmpin, and I've set to control that around here, like see. But right now we are using it for each and every element, and for that we are doing this stuff. I'm just going to copy this dmpin code around here, and rather than typing dmpin, because dmpin is actually box of multiple elements like this. So let's say if you had 5 dmpin, in this one we have 3, right? Because 1, 2, 3. So in that box there are like 3 of them. So when we type DM pin element like this, we are taking like each and every element one by one. So we will take this DM pin element and add it around here, and in the trigger we will add it around here like this. So it will loop, basically it's a loop. So it will do it for the first element first, then the second element first, and the third element next. And each time it would store the DM pin, the first DM pin into this one, because you see for each of them it will store it. If you guys don't understand, just remember to use it like this. Okay, so a quick easy explanation where if you don't want to get into much detail, you type constant create a box, add document query selector all, because we want multiple, type .dm pin, and now we have stored all our DM pin in our this box. Then we simply type that in our box for each element E capital. In this bracket we will create like an like a smaller box, I think, so that every time we like loop it, we are storing it in that box. So we can name it anything, but I like to keep it like consistent. So DM pin element like this, do this arrow icon kind of stuff, and like this. And from now on you would be using this instead of using DM pin, because every time we loop, we are storing the DM pin into this one small box like this. Let's just copy this one. Let's paste it in here. Let's see if that works. I do see some issue already. Let me see. Yep, there's an issue. We need to close this bracket. Because when we do open this, we also need to close this bracket like this. And you could see all three of them are working now like this, and they would be stuck until we reach like this point. And you see this creates like this weird issue if we are trying to do stacking on three of them, because the end point is around here for the first element. So as soon as this touches, it stops getting pinned. As soon as this touches, it stops getting pinned, and as soon as this touches, it stops getting pinned. For that, what we would do is, so the third element, I can just name it DM pin, and I can add like an extra CSS class by adding like DM pin end, something like that. So now we have two CSS class for the last element. I'll click this DM pin end, and inside of this I'll click the end trigger. We don't need to create for each, right, because this is only one. So I'll do end trigger, and here I'll type dot DM pin end. So my end trigger would be DM pin end. So every one of them would have the end trigger at around here, because if we don't add end trigger around here, each of them element have the start and end to itself. So you could see right now the start and end is to the trigger point. The start and end is the trigger point, start and end is the trigger point. But when we do end trigger, we would just have the start to be at its own trigger point, but the end at this last trigger point. So let's do update. So you could see it is doing start, and then just stop. It's going to stop as soon as this touches. Okay, so you could see all of them are touching perfectly. And right now I'll just make my both start and end to be 50-50, so that it is not like this. So both my start, scroller start and scroller end is in the center. So it is in the center like this. And you could see we got that effect of stacking containers. You might have seen this a lot more times, and like this one would stack on top and this one would stack on top. I also have a video on stacking containers that would explain to you how this works without doing GSAP, but this one allows you to create this pin effect. So I think that's all for this tutorial. I will be making more stuff. You could see that I actually had like planned stuff. So like I did translate, scale, rotation, delay, opacity, clip path, color, stagger, scroll triggers, club, repeat, yo-yo, pin. And then we also did timeline, and for draggable it just says to show video, but you can just check it out. Okay, so if you go to my blog page, might as well show you, why not, because I have ticked it here. Let's see if we can find it. If you go around here, create draggable element with Elementor and GSAP, you could see you can create like this element which is draggable with with GSAP, and the code is like very small. There's also a video on it. So these are all the stuff that I've shown. I didn't show this how to do, which is like toggle action. Text Stagger, I actually have like a complete video on it, which is like standalone, but if I want to, I can create it again in the second part of this video. Horizontal scroll, I'm still working on it to understand it better, how to add like more responsive stuff. So if you want, I think I should just show you guys something. If you search in your like match media, yeah, GSAP match media, this one allows you to create like different values or different stuff for different screen sizes. That I'll show later. And then extra is mouse move. So this would require like our JavaScript, basically JavaScript event listeners to learn this. And based on that, we could do some animations like I showed on this page. So in this page, you could see that if I move my mouse, it moves based on my mouse move. You don't really need GSAP for this. You can do this with just JavaScript basic one. But this one is like GSAP tutorial, right? Which is why I've used GSAP on this one based on my mouse move. So these are some stuff that I'm planning to do in the second one. If you have anything more that you want to learn in the second part, just leave it in the comments and hopefully I'll record a video for it if this video does well. So yeah, goodbye. Thanks for watching. Free templates are on the website. Cool stuff are on the website, blogs and stuff. And consider liking and subscribing, sharing, and goodbye.